Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute or two as people are still joining us. Just a few housekeeping notes before I get us started. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. We'll have time for a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And if you have questions as we go, please feel free to use the Q&A function of the meeting or put them in the chat. Also, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and closed captions are available, and we are also recording this, so the recording will be available after the webinar today. I'm just gonna give it another minute for people to come in. Again, good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started in just another minute. Waiting for the waiting room list to slow down. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And I think let's go ahead and get started. I'll hand it off to our president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, Patty Wilson-Aden.
Well, thanks so much, Kristen, and thank you all for joining us here today. I guess we should start first by sharing a little bit about the mission of the Cultural Alliance. Many of you are aware of the services we provide, but just in case you're not, we'll do a brief overview. The Cultural Alliance was established in 1972 in anticipation of the bicentennial. We are the Philadelphia region's foremost art service organization. And since our inception, our primary role has been to support our over 400 members through research, resources, advocacy, and more. Like all organizations, our programs have evolved and changed over time, but we've remained steadfast in our commitment to our core priorities. The Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance is a tireless advocate for arts and culture at the city, state, and federal levels. Our commitment to this work is made clear in our mission statement, which states the Cultural Alliance will amplify the voices of the cultural community. So we do this in a number of ways. We collaborate with our members within the cultural sector to identify and agree upon policy priorities. We often meet directly with elected officials to discuss legislation that directly impacts the cultural sector. We write letters. We encourage our members to write letters. A lot of you have sent those letters and emails in. And when necessary, we mobilize the cultural sector and our allies. At the Cultural Alliance, our research is often one of our most sought after services. We perform and commission rigorous, innovative research that informs cultural organizations, the public, foundations, and elected officials. Now, we consider this data that's generated by our research as essential to an unbiased, factual understanding of the sector. We also believe that everyone deserves to live a culturally enriched life, and that's especially true for our young children. One way we accomplish this is through the Bloomberg Arts Internship Program. The Bloomberg Arts Internship offers Philadelphia's rising high school seniors paid internship experiences. I'm going to underline paid internship experiences at arts and cultural organizations across the Greater Philadelphia region. The Cultural Alliance has been the Pennsylvania Partner of the Arts for the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts since 2002. So this is one of our core services. Under the partnership, we administered two different grants, the Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator Grant and the Creative Sector Flex Fund. And I know many of you who are participating today have probably participated in one or both of those grant programs. One of our cornerstone research projects is Arts, Culture, and Economic Prosperity. This year's report is an economic and social impact study of the Greater Philadelphia region's nonprofit arts and culture industry. Americans for the Arts conducts its arts and economic prosperity study every 5 years. This year's study marks the 5th time the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance has participated in this research. So I want to take a moment to pause here and acknowledge that prosperity. And no economic impact report is perfect. So I think we need to acknowledge that while we have high standards for prosperity, it's not perfect. Americans for the Arts takes a conservative approach to this report, and our region's results are based solely on the survey data collected. Now, what that means is that no estimates have been made to account for non-respondents. Therefore, the less than 100% response rate suggests that the economic impact findings in most of the individual study regions may actually be understated. Let me repeat that. There's no study, including this study, that guarantees 100% participation across the region and across the field. Therefore, we believe that in this study in particular, our impact findings may actually be understated. The data reflects fiscal year 2022, a year we all know was a hard one for arts and culture nonprofits. Attendance was low, organizations were still operating below capacity, and hiring was a challenge. And we know all of this through our most recent study, which was PA Culture Check, done in partnership with PA Humanities. This prosperity report confirms the economic effects on our region. In addition, surveying in May 2022 through June 2023 posed many challenges as the region was just beginning to recover from the effects of the pandemic. Many organizations were operating at below capacity and could not take on hiring or having surveyors at their sites. In addition, attendance in FY23 was found to be at 78% of the total capacity of the median organization, leading to a smaller survey base. So let's take all of that into consideration as we share the data here. Given these factors, we believe that the audience expenditures in general and hotel expenditures in particular are lower than what would be the case as our sector continues to recover from the pandemic and to reflect FY22 data. As such, if anything, the economic impact findings are conservative, and we will continue to analyze the sector post-pandemic. We are still on that trajectory of recovery. This report took place in 2022 when we were still struggling with the pandemic. So to say again, these results may in fact be conservative. Given all these mitigating factors, why are we still reporting on this data? Research, as we said, is one of the key services at the Cultural Alliance, and the Arts, Culture, and Economic Prosperity report is the only study that looks at spending patterns of the audience members through audience surveying. Having that data has truly been invaluable. So I think you will all agree later as you share this presentation. So despite the pandemic, despite inflation, arts and cultural organizations, along with their audiences, make Greater Philadelphia a fantastic place to live and work. It still has a tremendous economic impact on our region, even in times of downturn. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori Zier. Lori is our partner at PA Humanities. She serves as Executive Director of PA Humanities, and she's going to talk a bit about our research partnership. Lori?
Thank you so much, Patty. You know, our strategic partnership I say many times, we are better together. And that is true of PA Humanities and Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance because we come together to leverage our collective strengths for greater impact. We have combined expertise, a people-centered participatory approach coming from PA Humanities, and that meets seasoned data analysis. We both intentionally center equity and we have a shared vision, and that's around advocacy together for a stronger, more connected cultural sector. We put these results, these findings in your hands so that you can advocate for yourselves. And we take PA Culture Check, which is statewide, as well as locally here in the Philadelphia region. And we take that to track what is happening in the sector hand in hand with you and to look deeper with you of how organizations are engaging with community and adapting in the face of inflation and changing audience patterns and participation. And this has impact. I can tell you, I just received word most recently from Senator Fetterman's office in communication with them. They used our data from PA Culture Check to sponsor the STAGE Act of 2024, which would provide $1 billion in funding each year for the next 5 years to the nonprofit theater community. This data matters. And so we expect that the Arts, Culture, and Economic Prosperity Report is going to do the same. So thank you for joining us and hearing more about our strategic partnership. I'm going to turn it now over to Kristen Vin, as well as Nick Crossan, our partners.
Thank you so much, Lori. So without further ado, let's dive into this data. We had 540 arts and culture organizations participate in this research, either by responding to the Americans for the Arts AEP organization survey, or in the case of non-respondents, from data collected by the Cultural Alliance, reflecting their FY22 data, mostly budgets and attendance. And here you can see a breakdown of organizations by budget size. 67% were under 500,000 and 83% were under 1.5 million. Survey respondents represented a nice cross-section of disciplines. We have all sorts, including community organizations that represent community-based arts centers like Asian Arts Initiative, Abington Arts Center. We also have service organizations, which includes organizations like ourselves, the Cultural Alliance and PA Humanities, as well as Artreach and others that provide services to organizations and individuals. Overall, 37% of the organizations who participated were performing arts organizations. And as you can see here, participants were located all over the Philadelphia region, with 73% coming from Philadelphia County. The second component of this study is audience surveying. Over 1,000 individuals completed the survey while attending a performance, event, exhibit, or visiting a cultural facility in the Greater Philadelphia region from May 2022 through June 2023. We use an audience intercept methodology where participants are asked to complete a short survey about their spending related to that event, opinions about the social impacts of the arts, zip code of their primary address, and basic socioeconomic information. And these surveys only took place while attendees were attending an in-person event. And so here we go. As we all know, Greater Philadelphia's nonprofit arts and culture sector has been slowly recovering after being affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and, as we heard in Culture Check, inflation, and it still is. Despite that, the total economic impact of the region's nonprofit arts and culture industry is an impressive $3.3 billion. We break this down into several pieces, including direct and indirect induced spending, as well as what organizations generated and what was generated by audiences. The first thing we want to take a look at is direct expenditures, which totaled $1.9 billion for fiscal year 2022. Organizations had $1.2 billion in direct expenditures, and this reflects two data points. This is total operating expenditures and total capital expenditures reported during fiscal year 2022. Audiences generated $676 million. This amount reflects the total estimated dollars spent by arts and culture attendees as a direct result of attending an arts and culture activity. This includes spending from purchases from local establishments on goods and services like food and drink, retail shopping, local transportation, groceries and supplies, clothing, and childcare. The next thing we take a look at is indirect economic expenditures. So Prosperity measures the economic impact of the arts using a methodology that allows economists to track how many times a dollar is respent within the local economy, and thus measuring the economic impact generated by each round of spending. For example, when a theater company purchases paint from their local hardware store, there is a measurable economic effect of that initial expenditure within the community, but the economic benefits don't stop there, because the hardware store uses some of its income to pay the clerk who sold the paint, which is induced impact, as well as to pay other businesses such as the electric bill, aka indirect impact, and so on through additional rounds of spending. So what you can see here is that organizations generate an additional $1 billion in indirect and induced spending, and audiences generate an additional $403 million. So since the last time we did this research, one of the things we've really noticed is that the local economy has shifted. Arts, culture, and economic prosperity really captures the economic impact that stays within our region. And as we all know, spending has shifted away from local spending as people and businesses shifted their spending online during the pandemic. For example, Amazon saw a 220% increase in profit in 2021, and online shopping doesn't seem to be slowing down. So what we call this is the money that doesn't count towards local economic impact that is spent is called leakage and refers to the money that is spent outside of a community. Non-local spending has no economic impact within the community, whereas dollars spent within the community continue to have a local impact. For instance, if a ballet company is purchasing shoes from a non-local manufacturer, that's an example of leakage. However, if the shoe company was local, the expenditure would remain within the community and create another round of spending and local economic impact by the shoe company. One of the things we're still working on is to kind of estimate what that impact number might look like, but because we all know attendance has been down 22%. And as I said, as one of the reasons for a lower audience spend number of that 676 million in 2022 is that attendance, as we all know, has continued to be below pre-pandemic rates. In our most recent Culture Check survey, which we did with PA Humanities in 2023, only 32% of the region's arts organizations reported having attendance at 2019 levels or above. So attendance data collected from organizations from this survey showed that we're at about 13.5 million participants across the region. And here's some of the numbers that really interest me. One of the things, like Patty said, that sets this study apart is that it's the only national study that incorporates event-related spending by arts and culture audiences. So we found that the typical event attendee in Greater Philadelphia spends $49 per person per event. This does not include the cost of admission. So even as we adjust that number for inflation, it is $5 more than we reported in Agenda Prosperity in 2017. So what we kind of see here is that while audience spending as a whole is down because attendance was down, arts and culture goers are spending more money in our community than they were. And as audiences continue to return, audience spending will continue to grow. Another thing our audience survey gives us insight into is where audiences are from. For audiences who came to the Greater Philadelphia region at events across all 5 counties, 70% were residents of those 5 counties. However, for audiences at events in Philadelphia, nearly 50% are residents of Philadelphia and 21% were suburban residents. As we all know, tourists are an important part of the arts and culture ecosystem. More than half of tourists travel to the region specifically to attend an arts and culture activity. In addition, more than half said they would have traveled to a different community to attend a similar activity if the one they were currently attending was not available. This means that Philadelphia and the surrounding counties loses out on valuable audience dollars if arts and culture activities decrease in the region. Another thing we gained through our audience surveying was insight into the power of the arts and culture community in our region. 90% of arts and culture attendees agreed that the activity or venue where they took the survey was inspiring a sense of pride in their neighborhood or community. In addition, 80% agree that the venue or facility that they were surveyed at was an important pillar for them within their community. I'm going to hand it off to Nick now to go through some more audience spending information.
Oh, thanks, Kristen. This is Nick Crossan at PA Humanities with a few slides about spending and household income. We looked at different kinds of visitors, and one that we take special note of is overnight visitations. So people, no surprise, perhaps people who stay overnight spend a good bit more than people who are coming for the day, and they spend about $120 per person per day, right? So that's hotel costs, eating out, moving around the city. And then we also looked at people who are specifically, we know that they're going to dinner when they go to an event or an exhibition. And those folks also spend much more on meals than the average person. So about $37 per person on meals. And this takes into account maybe a nice meal, some folks going out to a nice meal that might be over $100, or also folks, you know, just having a sandwich and going to a show. One of the big components that we want to look at of all of this impact is what we call household income. So $1.4 billion of all of this winds up as what we call resident household income. So a lot of that is salaries, right? People on this call are getting, many folks on this call are lucky enough to get salaries from arts and cultural organizations, but this also accounts for salaries at hotels and museums. It accounts for spending at vendors that arts and cultural organizations hire. And it also accounts for perhaps maybe someone is a sole proprietor and they're getting a payment from these organizations. So again, a lot of this money, 1.4 billion, is going to households. The last time we looked at this, a little bit less than half are going to actual folks paid by arts and cultural organizations. So in fact, a little bit more than half is going back out into the community to all sorts of other jobs. Kristen? And this slide is an indication of where does this money start out, right? So many organizations are in Philadelphia, they're in Center City, they're on the Parkway, they're in Old City. So a lot of the checks for these organizations are cut in Philadelphia, and you can say a large number in Chester County, some big organizations there. But not everybody, of course, lives around the corner from where they work. And so this money winds up all across the region and indeed outside the region. So you can see we started out with about 3/4 of the money, the checks being cut in Philadelphia, but people, arts and cultural employees and other types of employees live throughout the region. And so you can see much more than half of it winds in other places throughout greater Philadelphia. So Montgomery, Delaware counties, and then smaller amounts wind up in southern New Jersey, Delaware, and indeed outside of the region.
Right. One of the things we like to take a look at every single time we do this report is what can 1.4 billion in household income pay for? So this money is used to pay for house payments, groceries, gas, and more. And as you may know, every time we kind of do this report, we like to do a fun number of what the total amount of household income could pay for in our region. In this case, you could purchase 137 million hoagies, Italian hoagies specifically, with $1.4 billion. We also took a look at the tax impacts of arts and culture. As we all know, arts and culture are a great return on investment beyond creating jobs, drawing tourism, and generating income for local business and communities. They also generate $429 million in local, state, and federal taxes. We're also proud that the Greater Philadelphia region ranks at the top when comparing direct expenditures per person, both organizations and audiences, when compared to other study regions who participated in this report with AFTA. In addition, the city ranks second when compared to cities and counties of similar sizes when comparing the same metric. Lastly, as we all know, there is a vast offering of arts and culture across the region in a number of different disciplines. So here you can see a brief snapshot of the economic impact across all of them, but the full report that'll be available later today has a full breakdown of 12 different disciplines and their economic impact. So overall, in conclusion, we note that this report shows that while attendance continues to be below pre-pandemic rates, as more audiences return to arts and culture in Greater Philadelphia, they are spending more than ever. Both residents and tourists are key to boosting the vibrancy and economic growth of the region. Arts and culture organizations are working to attract and retain audiences, and this is key to the vitality of our region. And funders, government, and beyond should support efforts to continue to grow the arts and culture sector. Secondly, cultural organizations buy and hire locally, as we've seen in this report. Audiences spend their money at local businesses close to where the venues are, events, and attractions. While the economy has shifted as more individuals and businesses purchase online, the core of the dollars spent in the arts and culture sector ripple through our local economy, benefiting a range of industries throughout our entire region. The spending benefits all sorts of related sectors as well, including retail, hospitality, restaurants, finance, real estate, and more. Third, spending by organizations and audiences, as Nick said, travels far from the original point of purchase. Household income and jobs are created across many industries in our region as a result of arts and culture. And the 1.4 billion in household income is huge for our region. This money buys groceries, pays rents, utilities, school tuition, and helps even start new businesses and much more. This affects workers across every part of Philadelphia and the surrounding counties as well. Finally, as we all know, when communities invest in arts and culture, they invest in an industry that stimulates the economy, supports local jobs, and contributes to building a healthy, vibrant, and more livable community. Now, Nick's going to take us through how you can use this report and how we'll use this report moving forward.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we know that economic impact, of course, is only one type of impact that arts and cultural organizations have in their communities. But it is often an important one for speaking to folks who are maybe not in the arts and cultural community. So last year when we were in Harrisburg, we actually had one of the senators on the Arts and Culture Caucus say, for him to say, I need this information. You know, I'm there. I understand the importance of arts and culture. I know what you all do in the communities, but I need help talking to other people in the legislature and outside the legislature who maybe are on the fence or maybe aren't sure or just don't pay that much attention to arts and culture. So economic impact numbers are often really helpful when we're speaking to civic leaders, to politicians, to business leaders, really folks who are maybe outside of the sector or aren't always thinking about the sector the way that we are. And then secondarily, there are some grant applications, usually they're capital grants from government agencies that will ask a specific organization about a project and ask how many jobs are generated. And so the custom reports available from the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance are there and can actually get you the numbers that you need for these specific types of grants. Kristen?
So as Nick said, we can provide organizations and also cohorts of organizations with their own impact report, which would be customized to them. Like Nick said, these can be helpful when applying for funding, as well as making your case to donors and board members. All of our reports will come with kind of a how-to guide so that you know how to make the most of your report. But I'm going to call on Michael Norris from Carpenter's Company to kind of talk about how they plan on using their report and its value in advocacy.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Yeah, we are in the Historic District pulling together a cohort of all the organizations that are, geographically here to create a case statement really for to encourage public funding around 2026. America 250, which, as you might imagine, is a fairly big deal in this part of the city, since the historic district will be kind of ground zero for those commemorations. And to date, there has been a fairly shockingly low amount of public investment in making sure that the commemorations are a success and the district is ready for company that's coming. So the report that we're putting together is going to be an aggregate report of all the sort of individual reports of all the individual organizations that are in the historic district. So we have an aggregate total of the economic impact of the historic district for when we go to make our case to to state and federal and city elected officials about why investing in the district for 2026 is going to be a really smart thing for them to do.
Thank you so much. And as you can see on the slide, reports start at $200, but for the rest of the week, we're offering webinar participants a $50 discount off each type of the customer report, and we will send you all more information in the follow-up email. All right, so now that we've wrapped, we can take some questions. I see there's some in the chat in the Q&A, but what are you seeing, Rosa and Paris?
Yeah, so there's a few questions here. I'll start with the first one, which is asking about some context of that number. And it says, what is the total size of the region's economy? I'm trying to understand where the $3.3 billion amount sits in relation to the entire economy of the Philadelphia region.
So I think,
Go ahead.
yeah, this is Nick Crossan. So we do have, the Philadelphia economy is massive, right? When you include New Jersey and Delaware, you're really talking about well over 500 billion. But again, that includes other portions. When we've looked, where we have a percentage of is a great report that gets done every year by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And for Pennsylvania overall, they generally say that arts and culture is about 3.3 or 3.4% of the economy of the state. So it might be a little bit more in Philadelphia, given the size of the cultural sector here, but it generally falls in that area.
Thanks, Nick. And another question here is, how do you factor inflation?
Yep, so that's an easy calculation kind of anyone can do. I think it's the Bureau of Labor, but it might be somebody else has an inflation calculator. So in order to do the specific one as it relates to the audience spending, we took that amount, which I think was something like $33 back in 2016, and saw what that would be like in mid 2022, which is like $35, which was the midpoint of when the survey was taking place.
And that is all that we're seeing in the chat here, but a reminder to folks to put your questions in the chat if you have any additional ones.
And just give that a moment, and we're always happy to take questions via email, or if you want to give us a call. I'll have our info up in a second.
And as folks are typing, another one came in. It said, your report has some very interesting comparative data on expenditures per capita. Any similar comparative information on support from public sources per capita?
Nick, I'm gonna let you take that one as you've looked into that.
Yeah, I think we're looking at this now, and we looked at this a little bit, and we'll put out some numbers. But we do have it for the city of Philadelphia, which is the last time we looked around $14 per capita. And compared to for example, New York City is about $18 per capita. San Francisco is usually the most per capita, usually over $50 per capita. And one thing that's happened since the last study is that Pittsburgh city of the Allegheny County has I think it's a 0.1% or 0.5% tax that goes to arts, culture, and parks through something called ARAD. And from the last time we looked at the numbers until now, Pittsburgh has well passed us in terms of per capita contribution to arts and cultures. They used to be right around where we were, around $13, $14. But because they have this automatic mechanism, they're now up to about $17 or $18. So Philadelphia's okay, but falling a little bit behind.
Yeah, I'll also add to that NASA, which is the National Association of State Arts Agencies, has great data on the state per capita spending at state arts agencies, and Pennsylvania is pretty low. It's like 33rd amongst the 50 states.
Yeah, and we're behind all of our neighbors. Like every single neighboring state, New Jersey, Maryland, West Virginia, has a higher per capita than Pennsylvania. That's at the state level.
And I see, Michael, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just curious if there were going to be, sort of formal briefings at City Council and in Harrisburg for the data, right? We're so used to, or at least maybe I am, just because I'm old, having a live gathering, to present this. So, and obviously it's only useful to the extent that the people who can control the purse strings know about it. So are there plans for that?
Patty, do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Sure, I will jump in on that. We are not planning a formal presentation. However, we are leveraging our relationships with members of City Council, our champions within the Parker administration, the Arts Caucus at the state level to share this information directly. We want them to use the information and have direct access to us as they have questions. So we're establishing one-on-one conversations to share this out. We're also depending upon the press to get this out. Our partners in the media have expressed interest. We have done a press release and are looking forward to some follow-up interviews. So this information, especially some of the high-level takeaways, will be presented in the media as well.
Yeah, I like to say this is the start of the rollout of Prosperity. We've still got a lot to go, even though this release has been 2 years in the making, and we'll do presentations to different counties. I don't think I mentioned that, but we will also have data for each of the counties, including Philadelphia County, in addition to all of the disciplines. Disciplines will be available today. Counties will be about mid-May before we have that data.
And I also wanted to mention that Pittsburgh has started to release and is going to do a full release of their report as well. So there are more reports to come across the state. And we look forward with GPCA and others to take this to the state level.
And I see another question in the Q&A about if a customized report could drill down on some of the data we've collected. For example, organizations with a budget lower than 500,000, or filter for different categories of cultural organizations. And absolutely, I think that's something we can put together. Like Michael said, we've done one specifically for the Old City Historic District organizations. All of that straight information will, just plain disciplines will be available on the website, but we can do a different sort of them if you're looking for a specific type or specific organizations themselves. And I see one more question about the press release. I believe the press release should be going up on the website, Rosa, after this, as well as the full report will be up on our website after the call, and we'll include that all in a follow-up email to everybody who signed up for the webinar. Great. If we don't have any more questions, Rosa, have you seen anything? Paris or Rosa, anything?
One comes from Paris and it says, what is the next, whoops, popping away. What is the next report data that GPCA and the team will work on? What will it be useful for? What other data is being collected in the sector?
Yeah, so we are working on the next edition of our culture check report with PA Humanities to be a follow-up to that report across the state. We're also going to look at some jobs data to get a look at employment across the region in arts and culture. And I think that's the major thing we're working on right now.
PA Humanities is working with the team at Drexel on the PA Humanities Discovery Project that delves into practitioners across the state of their perspectives on what's happening on the ground. So more to come on that over the summer.
And I see one more question here. Especially given the Cultural Alliance's roots, how are we and the arts and culture community generally leveraging targeting funds potentially available in relation to the USA 250 celebration? So Patty, I'm going to kick that one over to you.
Sure. First of all, 2026 is going to be a big deal. It is not only the semi-quincentennial, but FIFA will be here, Major League Baseball, All-Star Game will be here. And even given that context, funds are very, very limited to support grants directly to organizations participating in the 2026 celebration. We're hoping to grow that. We are working with our partners in the city. We're very pleased to have a champion in the Parker administration and Michael Numis, who's the director of 2026. We are also working with PHL 250, Art Philly 2026, and others to see if we can grow the amount of funding that's available to organizations to have a meaningful role in presenting Philadelphia to the thousands, hundreds of thousands of guests who will come to Philadelphia. One thing that we have talked about consistently is that while people might come to Philadelphia to participate in these events, they will return because of their cultural experiences. And the data has proven this again and again. And in fact, not everyone who comes to Philadelphia will be a ticket holder. A family might come to visit Philadelphia for FIFA, but what do they do after the game? What do they do if not all of them have tickets to the games? All of these are reasons for the cultural community to be very active and very, very visible. These are reasons that we are presenting to the philanthropic community and the public sector to encourage funding and support for arts organizations. We hope that 2026 will not be an episodic spike for the cultural community where we get deeply engaged and then things fall back down. We are having conversations about long-term benefits where beyond 2026 to 2027, 2028 and ongoing, organizations are lifted by the events surrounding the semi-quincentennial and these other activities. And we're getting some good response, but I have to emphasize again that the funding at this point is limited.
Any more questions?
I am not seeing any more questions in the chat, but lots of notes of thanks, so I have to echo those.
And if there are no other questions, I just want to like extend my deepest gratitude to every organization who took the time to participate in our economic impact survey. And on top of that, I also want to express my appreciation to all of the organizations who let us survey their audiences. Your willingness to engage in this process, especially in the middle of a pandemic, has provided us with vital insights into the economic recovery of the arts and culture sector in our region. And lastly, I want to especially thank PA Humanities, our research partner, and Nick Crossan for all of their collaboration on this report, ensuring that the integrity of our data analysis and enabling us to present a comprehensive and insightful portrait of our sector's economic impact. So thank you all once again for being here today. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us via email.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
And thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thanks.
Kristen.
Thank you.
Good job.